how do you ask somebody out?
Well, Jonathan, I think it's very simple, but we tend to make it very complex. Break the mold, be different.
How do I make the person feel safe? Because that's something that is present in a lot of people's minds.
When you ask somebody out, if you give a person options, it makes that person feel more comfortable and more in control.
What's the number one thing that people make as a mistake?
Rush.
I'm curious if you've ever had a situation where you engaged with somebody and it went horribly wrong. She was offended, she was upset, somebody tried to film you on Instagram.
I was making her laugh. We were having a good time together. We were in a social place, and I asked for her socials, and she...
Welcome to Kaizen Connection, where our mission is to turn your next challenge into the opportunity that changes everything. Eric Bertso, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate you inviting me over. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, my brother told me, he's a good friend of yours, that you're really excellent at sales. I understand that that's your background.
Yeah, so when I graduated high school, I had really good grades, and this insurance company, well known, Global Life, recruited me to be a salesman for them, and I took the opportunity. I became a salesman for close to a year, and in about a month I became a manager. So I became the youngest manager in that company. So I have a bit of experience with that. I was a life insurance agent, to be more specific.
Very cool. And I always appreciate somebody that can be good at sales. I think for me, a lot of times the best salespeople are the ones that have a personality, they're willing to listen to you. And that's what I think of in terms of relationships. Another thing that I was told about you was that you're really good at making somebody comfortable, asking them out, going on a lot of in-person dates. And that's something that's rare and valuable now, I think. So the question I wanted to ask you was, how do you ask somebody out?
Well, Jonathan, I think it's very simple, but we tend to make it very complex, and that's where the magic is. You know, meeting somebody new can seem very difficult, very intimidating, because you're afraid of the what ifs that could happen. But I think the best way to do it is to go out of the mold, to go beyond just the looks, to go beyond just a simple compliment, but to find a connection with that person with the little information that you have. For example, I went to a gym not so long ago, and I was doing my workout routine like normal, and I saw this girl near me that was very attractive, or I found very attractive. And I noticed that we kept making eye contact. So initially, it's the, nonverbal cues that you see that, oh, there might be something there, there might be some attraction. Then from there, I started to pay attention to her exercise, We haven't gotten to that part yet, but I'm studying physical therapy, so that's one of my big passions. So I was looking at her movements, making sure she was doing the exercise well. And then I noticed a tattoo on her calf. She had a tattoo of a rib cage. So I noticed that, and I took that as one of my opportunities. So when the time came, I went near her and I told her, hey, what's that tattoo about? And a conversation started, and we went from there. I took what she told me about it to find conversation for something else. So I think it's about breaking the mold, because I could have easily said, hey, you're very pretty. But then where do I go from there? What can she say? Thank you. And that's it. So I think we'll get into it later, but I think initially, just break the mold, be different.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. That makes a lot of sense to me, because that's something I've heard in context to dating apps. Like, a lot of people will just say, hey, and you want to distinguish yourself while giving them something to latch onto, right? You want to give them something that can turn into a conversation that will lead to a relationship. Well, when I think of asking somebody out, there's two things that I think about. The first is, how do I make the person feel safe? Because that's something that is present in a lot of people's minds. And then the second thing is, how do you sell yourself without coming across as arrogant? So I'll let you answer the first one first. How do you make somebody feel safe when you're asking them out?
Well, I think when it comes to making the person feel safe, one thing that I've learned from the experiences that I've had is by giving the person a choice. When you ask somebody out, if you give a person options, it makes that person feel more comfortable and more in control. Versus if you tell that person a direct option. For example, if I'm gonna ask a girl out to a date or something like that, let's say I go up to her and we've had a few talks and all that. I go up to her and I'm like, well, hey, I really enjoy spending time with you. I'd really like to, try something new with you outside of school. Would you prefer to go bowling or would you rather go eat something? And then I go from there. I let her choose and have control over what we do in particular so that she feels more in control. So she feels that way. I feel like that shows her that I'm respecting her opinions, her choices, and that way she feels safer because she knows what to expect. Because that fear between the two individuals is from not knowing what's coming next. So if you can give that person context and control, that makes them feel safer.
I think people are afraid of the unexpected, and saying that when somebody knows where the conversation's going, somebody knows what your intentions are, I think that takes away a lot of the unknown, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that does help them be much less afraid. And then the other thing is, how do you sell yourself without coming across as a punk? Like, don't be me from the past. Like, how do you sell yourself as somebody that's not arrogant?
That's a good question. I think it honestly comes down to understanding what we like internally. We like to feel good. We like to show off, in a sense, what we can do. But I think a relationship, it's not about, oh, this is what I am. This is why you should like me. Because then that gives an appearance to that person of, I like him because I think he's this. And the moment that you're not that, it begins to break down because it's not who you are. So I think the way that you sell yourself, quote unquote, to the other person is by making them feel comfortable. Because there's always going to be somebody taller, stronger, more handsome, or more beautiful than the individual. So I think it comes down to how comfortable do you feel with that person? How real does it feel with you? Because anybody can be more than somebody else. But building those connections between people, I think is what really sells somebody. Because relationships are not built on, oh, I'm this, I'm that. But the relationship is built on, I really don't see myself without that person. So I think it comes down to how well and how good are you at making those bonds with that person without having to show off who you are. Let that person discover who you truly are by spending time with you without having to say it. So I think if I were to summarize it, it would be, don't verbalize it. Just let that go. Those qualities are going to come out as time flows. You don't need to sell yourself to nobody because you are valuable. You are unique. You don't need to sell yourself to anybody else for a relationship.
Interesting. There was a YouTuber, and he made a video. His whole channel is about how to be charismatic. And then he went on a live interview like this, and I watched the interview. I thought it was fine, but I didn't realize how many cuts are made in some of the interviews sometimes, and it's easier to make somebody look good. He made a reaction video too. It said, yeah, I actually messed up. I was super awkward when I went on this channel, and what he said was, I figured out how to act. And the problem was, once I got into the live thing, there was so much pressure on me. The person I had become wasn't the person that needed to be there on that. So I needed to figure out how to step into my more natural element and just be that person. And I think that's something a lot of us know. I mean, everyone says, just be yourself when it comes to how do I get somebody to like me. But I don't know that we all understand the nuances of what that means. How do you be your most relaxed self when you're talking to somebody? Because that's who you are. Nobody really wants to date anxious me, you know?
Honestly, and I appreciate the compliment, I think it comes down to internal peace. I am comfortable speaking to, I'm very social. I can speak with the other gender, and any person I can speak to because I'm comfortable with who I am. I think the skill of being able to talk to somebody and truly be yourself, as they say, comes from knowing who you are and being honest with who you are, accepting who you are, and then bettering yourself. You're not going to be your best version from day one. But if you continuously try to grow and better yourself, working out, eating better, healthier habits, you start to feel better about yourself. And because you know who you are and you're true to who you are, you can just talk with somebody else. It's not an act that you put on to be yourself. It's the fact that you know who you are and you're comfortable with who you are because you're trying to improve. That makes you or allows you to just talk to somebody else. So I think it comes down to there is no secret formula to being yourself to talk to somebody. It comes down to, are you comfortable with who you are? Because if you are, then just talking with somebody else like I am with you is natural. You don't have to put on an act.
How does somebody get to the point where it's natural, though?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, how many of these conversations that you've had, they said no?
Wow, yeah, a lot. So just I guess it comes back to the sales, or the sales idea comes back to dating. For every maybe 10 girls that you ask out, you might get 9 no's. But that's just life. You got to keep trying, Actually, I feel better when they say no. Well, I don't feel bad about it because I know that, okay, if it wasn't her, just imagine the one that's going to say yes. And again, it comes down to more of a religious background, but I like to believe that if God says no to that person who I thought was going to be my ultimate yes, I just like to believe that my yes is going to be so much more amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And somebody told me this in college, and I don't know that I fully believed him. He said, yeah, you're going to get 99 no's for every one yes. And I think that's even more so true at the beginning because you're nervous, you're anxious, and your personality, the great stuff, doesn't come out as much when you're anxious. And even though you might be comfortable who you are, that's like on the spotlight. It's almost like being on camera because there's somebody really cute looking right at you, and you're fumbling.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's a skill, but like anything, you just keep trying, and keep trying because it's not easy. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect. I make mistakes all the time. For every girl that I talk to, there's always a chance that she's going to say no. There's always a risk involved. But I like to believe that why not take the risk? Why not? Because if you don't take that risk, if you don't go for it, you're going to think about that later. It's better to go for it. Just get a no, move forward, and just keep trying, Of course, give yourself some time, refresh, understand that it's part of it, and then just, when you feel comfortable, try again.
Do you think people prefer to be asked out in person?
I think so. Because anybody, especially in dating apps, I think, anybody can say whatever, but you don't know that person, you can't see that person. I feel like in person, you can read a person with their body language. You can tell when somebody's confident by the way that they walk, the way that they carry themselves, the way that they speak to you is very important. So I truly prefer in person just because I feel like that's where I can shine. You can truly be yourself in person versus behind a screen, you can only put so many pictures that try to reflect who you are.
Right. And anyone can write well. I mean, you can put it into ChatGPT if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It's been said that men get turned on with their eyes and women get turned on with their ears. I know that's a generalization, but I think that that's pretty accurate for a lot of stuff. And when you've got a dating app, you have so many options. And it seems like what happens is people tend to get trickled toward a funnel where the top 1%, top 2% is getting a ton of likes, and there's a bunch of us just sitting out here on the rim where we really would be better off if we all just went somewhere and met somebody and actually met them in person rather than trying to deal with 2 prompts and a picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely correct, yeah.
Why do you think more people don't do this?
As in, ask people out socially or in person?
Yeah.
I think it's a comfort of, like you said, it's getting put on the spotlight. Behind the screen, you have control. You can choose when to respond. You can ignore it if you want. But in person, you don't have an option. You go for it, and you have one. It's not one time, but you're limited to the amount of times you can interact with that person without setting a bad, impression or a good one. So it's the spotlight that people are trying to avoid by using the apps, I think.
Or the illusion of control.
Yeah, the illusion of control, I think it's...
You have so many options, but sometimes the more options you have, the less choices people make. I mean, if you've ever been to a restaurant where there's 110 things on there, and I think that's why people like going to places like In-N-Out, where you really only have one option on the menu. I can get burger and fries, or I can get a burger with 2 patties and fries.
That's true, yeah. I completely agree, yeah.
But finding somebody within your community it feels different. And I wonder if part of that's because it's the FOMO, the fear of missing out on something that's better.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the option to turn the guys up to 6'3" and filter out everyone else. Doesn't necessarily mean that all those people are going to want to be with me if I'm the girl or I'm the guy. It's like all the Instagram pretty. You have the illusion that I've got all these options. Just, are these actually available? And if I had it, would I be afraid that there wasn't something better out there? And might that paralyze me from actually making a choice? So there's definitely something to be said for finding somebody within your own community, because that's how it used to be, right? Like, you live in a small town, you have people that you interact with and you meet, and you get to know them. And another thing that's interesting to me about dating apps is, even though we seem like we've been playing with the gender roles, like, there's different narratives depending on who you talk to about what is supposed to be what. And we're looking for a society where we've kind of got an equal share in things. But in spite of that, it seems like the ladies still want the gentleman to initiate. Why do you think that's important?
I honestly think it comes down to women feeling more desired, and again, it's a social idea that men are supposed to be the ones that come forth and do that, and it's for women. I think it's, why not? They get to choose who they want to date, and they kind of have more control over the situation. I would say it's just, honestly, it hasn't changed because not enough people are doing the opposite. Not enough girls are asking out guys. So it hasn't changed. It's simple for the women to just continue on with, bettering themselves and waiting for a man to be able to go up to her and have the quote unquote guts to ask her out and make conversation. And I think it's also a way for women to see the partner and see what type of skills the partner has when it comes to communication. It is a really good question. For me, honestly, I know it sounds weird, but I honestly prefer to be the one, quote unquote, chasing versus when the woman is chasing me. I'm not sure why, honestly, but it might just be our human instinct.
I think a lot of these things are more based in nature than people realize or want to admit. The male bird builds a nest, and the female bird decides if she wants to live in that nest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the guy's performing, and the girl is choosing, just like you were talking about. So, I mean, in the sense he's chasing, he's building the nest. These roles are more defined than they're socialized. I mean, these roles are more defined by nature than they're socialized in a lot of ways. I'm curious if you've ever had a situation where you engaged with somebody and it went horribly wrong. She was offended, she was upset, somebody tried to film you on Instagram, because I think that's the worst case scenario that's in a lot of people's minds.
Honestly, not to that extreme, but I guess the worst situation I've had, or the worst situations that I run into, are when the girl is already taken or has a boyfriend. So I guess an example would be, I was talking to this girl and everything was going really great. I was making her laugh. We were having a good time together. We were in a social place and I asked for her socials and she gladly gave them to me. And then I started talking to her about making plans for the weekend and so forth. And then she dropped me I have a boyfriend, so I won't be able to do that. So I was like, Well, that's kind of the very difficult situation, I think, for guys, because you don't know what to do. Because if you continue pursuing, then you're seen as desperate and almost creepy for continuing to push for a relationship when she's already taken. But then if you just back away, it's kind of weird. It makes it weird now if you see each other, because it's like, well, he tried to date me, but I told him I'm already taken and so forth. So I guess that's kind of the weird situations that I've ran into, where I'm not so sure how to fix that relationship from that point. Because once either party shows that they're wanting more than just a friendship, the relationship, I think, can't be the same anymore. No matter, at least in my perspective, my personal experiences, the relationship, although might appear normal, always has some sort of abnormality because of that situation.
I had a friend in college that liked to say, boyfriends are speed bumps, not roadblocks.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily agree with that,
Yeah.
but I think it's funny.
Yeah.
He said husbands are roadblocks, so absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's true. Sometimes somebody's dating somebody and then later on they're not, and then why should you both be alone when you could be together?
Yeah.
But you got me thinking about that. I was making her laugh. How important is that in a relationship?
I think it's crucial, especially for me. I like to call myself a social butterfly. I love comedy. I just love comedy. And I think if you're going to spend time with somebody else that you love, you need to be able to have fun with them. Things are going to be serious. There's times to be serious, but most of the time you can't be, arguing with each other. There has to be some connection further than just habits. It's about finding common ground. I think it comes down to that. Having a connection with your partner associated with comedy, I think it's very important because you find common ground. And that's where you start building those internal jokes. And those are the little stuff that make the relationship last, I think, for the long run. I've had one relationship, one true relationship. And that one relationship lasted me about 6 years. So I think what matters in relationships that go far is the amount of internal connections that you have, the inside jokes. Although they seem not relevant, they actually play a huge role, because that's what distinguishes your relationship between each other to her friend. So I think that's very important.
How important is humor in the initial interaction when you're trying to ask her out?
I think it can be used in two ways. Either that can be your key way to start the conversation, or it can be a key way to finish the conversation. For example, that example about the girl with the tattoo, I initially started with something interesting, like her tattoo. So she talked to me about all her interests and all that because of that. And then I finished off with a little joke. So, well, to build up to that, she told me that she was really interested in coffee and stuff like that. And then I finished the conversation by saying, well, I've been around town for a few weeks and I haven't tried any good coffee. Maybe you have a good place that we can try. Something around those lines. Finishing with something fun, So I think that's how you can use comedy, either to initiate the conversation or to finish in a good note.
To me, it seems like part of the thing that makes you a great salesman and great at interacting with people in general is that you're so relaxed and you don't come across as somebody that's trying to push. And I think that's something that people have experienced a lot, and if they feel pressure, then they run away. But since you're relaxed, I think that makes people open up and be more fluid and more open to further experiences with you.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to being comfortable yourself, and then just transmitting that to somebody else so that they feel comfortable being around you.
Are there any deal breakers, like things that if you did them, then that's probably going to screw you every single time? So that, say, if I was doing that thing, if I learned to just not do that thing, it could be the difference between success and failure. What's the number one thing that people make as a mistake?
They rush. People mistake feeling lonely with uh, or wanting somebody to needing somebody. So when you meet somebody, I think we especially tend to start to imagine stuff as soon as we make an interaction with somebody. We start thinking about the future. We start thinking about further in the relationship. And that kind of builds this pressure inside of us that makes us make mistakes, makes us act out of character, makes us feel nervous in front of that person when we truly shouldn't, because nothing has happened. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm still working on a lot of stuff within myself and when I communicate with other people, because especially when we interact with women, at least for me, it's about, living in the present and not rushing to anything. And that way I keep myself at peace so that I don't make any mistakes associated with rushing. Because I believe some people, and I've talked with several of my friends about this, we tend to get too comfortable initially and start rushing the process, start making too many moves towards the girl, being a little too touchy or making too many assumptions. And I feel like that's a big mistake that we make. Just live in the moment, take your time, because if you think about it, if this person is somebody who's meant to be with you, you have your whole life to get to know them. So why rush into the relationship? Let it season, let it cook, and then as time flows, you'll see that it becomes second nature to interact with that person.
I've been told that a lot of times the best relationships just happen. That being said, I'm curious about this not rushing thing, because I know a lot of people that they seem to make this an excuse, as in, I haven't got to know the person yet, therefore I can't ask them out. And my response to that a lot of the times is, wouldn't you get to know that person if you went on a date with them? So what's the distinction between I don't want to rush versus I am not ready to try something yet, and that's becoming a crutch for me?
It's a really good question. I think, especially with the I don't want to rush, I think it's based on the relationship and where it's at now. If the other half is slowing down on the conversation, if the other half is seeming less and less interested, then yeah, maybe having a little bit of a talk and saying, hey, would you want to spice things up by doing something else? And then based on that response, you would be able to gauge whether they're backing off because they're not interested, or they're backing off because you're not moving forward. So I think it comes down to, okay, are things getting better? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? And then if you feel like things are getting worse, then initiating by changing something. And then if the person wants to try something new with you, then it's good news. It means that they're wanting to try. You're just not moving at this fast enough, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It actually reminds me of something one of my friends said. One thing I wanted to ask her was, how did people ask you out? Because I know she goes on a lot of dates, very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so she told me, she said, well, a lot of times somebody come up and initiate something, but they're not telling me their name or anything. They're finding some kind of a connection, like they saw me taking notes or something. Oh, you must be serious about this.
Mm-hmm.
Or said one time she was on a trail and there was a guy coming the other direction and there was construction going on. He stopped and said, hey, do you know what they're doing there? And she said, no, I have no idea. And he said, oh, okay, so where are you headed? And she's like, okay, I see what you're doing there, but I'll run with it. And so it sounds like what you're saying is find a way to make some kind of a connection so it's not awkward, because no one wants to be uncomfortable in that kind of an interaction. So you're not rushing it by not making them uncomfortable. Then once you've made that person feel comfortable, maybe you've made them laugh, find a way to go deeper. Do you have a boyfriend? Are you single? And the line that she told me somebody asked her out with was so smooth. I thought it was brilliant. It's simple. Are you single? I'd love to take you out. And it works in so many different contexts. You're not really pushing that hard with that kind of a line. You're kind of giving them the option to tell you, yeah, I'm single. No, I'm not. So I think you've kind of helped them relax while at the same time you've made your intentions clear.
Can I give you another piece of information there?
Please.
One thing that I've learned, especially with the first interaction, you want to make it short. You don't want to drag it long, because no matter how calm you might appear, you're always going to be nervous. You know, it's a first interaction. You find this person attractive for both genders. You know, it's going to be nerve-wracking. But even though you can stay calm, you want to keep it short and simple, because the longer you drag it, the more chance there is that you make a mistake and you say something that you didn't really mean to say. So I'd say add to that. Make it quick, make it short, make it simple. It doesn't need to be complex. A simple laugh, a simple smile is enough. Make your intentions clear, you know, and then go on with your day. Because you don't want to make a mistake because you stay too long.
Yeah, and even if you don't, it's going to be more awkward, because that's kind of how we learn to interact with people. First, it's like head nod, or you're at the bench next to me at the gym. Hey, oh, looks like you're pressing a lot today. And then, I mean, that would be a weird thing to actually say, but like as an example, I mean, that you get what I'm saying. Yeah. There's small interactions that build into larger interactions. You try to jump right in there. Sometimes I think that creates awkwardness in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's great. You just have to find little bits and pieces of information that you can use when the time comes to speak a little longer.
Well, on this podcast, we have a closing tradition where the audience fields questions and we have speakers select those questions. So the question's been chosen for you is, what misunderstanding about life did you have for the longest, and what made you realize the truth?
Wow. I think that the big misunderstanding I had growing up was I always seemed to be excluded from groups. And I used to think that was bad growing up. I used to question, why was I different? Why was I separated from different groups? And I used to think that was bad or negative. But then I realized that that separation came from uniqueness. You know, I'm comfortable, and I've been comfortable, even when I was young, being by myself. And that's, I guess, abnormal for some people. You know, some people want to have a group that supports them, that's always around them, to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel validated. So I think people think that because they're alone and not with a partner or not with a lot of friends, that they're doing something wrong. When in reality, they're doing nothing wrong, but they're just unique. And that's to be celebrated. Don't worry if you don't have thousands of friends or, you know, thousands of whatever. Be comfortable and be happy with who you are. And if you're not, then start making changes so that you're more comfortable with who you are. That's why I feel like a big misunderstanding. It's not about how many friends you have. It's about how comfortable you are when everybody else is not around you.
Yeah, and the more things you depend on for your identity, the more likely one of those things is going to crash and burn, and then potentially so will you, which kind of blows.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been great having you here, Alberto.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I love talking with people about these topics, and I'm glad you invited me over.
All right.